Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Information Challenge Summer Camp panel discussion. I am Dr. Weaver, along with Professor Heidenblad. We have been hosting 13 students this week from Prince George's County and Montgomery County. They have done an amazing job of learning about Tableau and understanding how to do data analysis, and did some fantastic projects. So what we're treating them to now is a panel discussion that's going to host a variety of information professionals so that we can all learn about how information is used in a variety of settings. I'd like to introduce our moderator this afternoon. Andy Fellows is on the faculty at the University of Maryland College of Information Studies, along with Professor Heidenblad and I. He is joined us several years ago and has made an amazing impression, connecting us with folks at College Park and doing just pretty much anything we need in terms of connections outside of the iSchool. He's also the former mayor of College Park, so kind of makes sense that we need him to make the connections in College Park for us. I am going to turn it over to him, and I'm going to make myself go away so that you can highlight, and then Mr. Fellows will be going through the process of introducing all of the different panelists, and we will be excited to learn all about information professions.
Thanks, Dr. Weaver. I'm really happy to be speaking to you all today because I'm very impressed, first of all, that you are spending the time you are this summer involved in a camp to learn more about information and to show your stuff. And from what I've heard, you've done amazing things in this camp. The purpose of this panel is to get you thinking more about information as a career. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself just to give you a different kind of context, or one, at least one route to get to a career in information, which when I graduated from college, I graduated from Boston University, and I majored in broadcasting and film or communications, but my real goal was to really make the world a better place. I knew I wanted to make a difference and work on issues that were important to people. And I ended up doing political work for actually 30 years overall, but I also traveled around the United States doing political work in different places. And I also came to graduate school here at the University of Maryland in American Studies to study culture and politics, and I became the president of the graduate student government. I ended up running for office in College Park and got on the city council. But all of the ideas that I did along the way was pursuing a career to make the world a better place. I was recruited to the university by the Environmental Finance Center, and it was to work on sustainability with the University of Maryland, with Prince George's County and local communities. And I became aware of the iSchool and the College of Information Studies and the information technology world in general as it applies to the things that I'm interested in, which is making the world a better place, through the Smart Cities Initiative and getting to know the faculty and leadership of the College of Information Studies. And one of the things that's really cool about information is that it connects to every different issue. There's 12 schools and colleges at the University of Maryland, and a really wide variety of academic disciplines. Information touches and connects to all of those. And so my work in general at the university is getting the university to be more engaged, even more engaged off campus on issues of sustainability and resilience, which is, there's a lot of information in those issues. I run a capstone, I teach a capstone in the iSchool for graduating undergraduate students, and I know there's also capstones for our graduate students in human computer interface management, and also the master's in information management. I know from doing that how useful information can be in terms of tackling any kind of issues that communities can come up with. So I encourage you, as you listen to speakers today, to think about both how you can develop a career in information technology, but also how you can use information tools and the things that you're learning even now in high school, but in college and beyond, in your community and in your work and in your personal life. So again, congratulations on being here. You're all way ahead of the game, and I think you're going to learn a lot from today's speakers. I'm honored to introduce, I'm going to introduce all the speakers one by one as they go through. They'll all be speaking to you a little bit about what they're doing, and we'll have an opportunity to answer questions at the end. So the first speaker is Travis Wafer. He's a health systems data analyst at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. And Travis, if you turn your screen on and take it away.
Hello, thanks for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Travis Wafer. I am a University of Maryland alumni myself. I graduated in 2010 with degrees in physics and mathematics. For the last decade or so, I have been working in the field of data analysis and software development. My career started working at a small startup-ish company outside of Boston, Massachusetts, where my first job was as a data technician. Basically, the company that I worked for there maintained a large database of business contacts for people that wanted to network and such through the business world. And what I specifically did there was I helped manage a relatively large MySQL database of about around a little sort of a terabyte worth of data. We had all kinds of different data sources that were coming in that needed to be cleaned, processed, maintained. We were constantly getting new updates of data where we would find old sources that were no longer valid, and we wanted to mark those as such, or new source or new data that was saying that something else that we had got updated and was more valid than we thought, or things like that. So I did a lot of work directly in the SQL database, maintaining the data, automating the process of doing these updates and stuff. I did that for a few years, and then later on I transitioned to be a software engineer at the same place. There I worked more on the more with programming in Python to help do more automation and handle some of the applications that we had there that use this data. So kind of an in-between sort of middleware, if you're familiar with that term, taking data from the database and being able to pass it up to a front-end application, and making that interface between the two as simplified as possible so that the front-end application knows what it needs and can do so cleanly. I did that for about a year before I moved over to where I work now at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, which is in Lower Maryland, very near College Park. So I've had a few different jobs since I've been at the Applied Physics Lab. It's very common here to move around from department and sectors within there. They highly encourage it. So when I first started off, I was doing software engineering for modeling and simulation of RF communications. So RF communications, things, like radio signals and such that you would use to communicate. I worked doing the software development for a relatively large modeling and simulation effort to be able to know, when messages can be received, what conditions they would be more likely to be received in and such. There's also a lot of analysis going on with the output of that data that we were generating. I did that for a little while before moving over to another part of APL here, where I worked in analytic wargaming, which is, if you're not too familiar with that, it's basically wargaming is heavily used in the business world and with some Department of Defense sponsors to kind of do some what if analysis and things like that, to practice things that you might want to do in a different setting. And what I specifically focused on in that was the data collection and data analysis. So a lot of times these events happen, there's a lot of good discussion, there's a lot of good things that happen, but it doesn't get necessarily captured very well. People might do something really interesting, or something comes up and they talk about it for a bit and they go with it, and then it gets lost. So what I primarily focused on was ways to, as quantitatively as possible, capture that information for different wargaming events. And then afterwards, we would do analysis on that data and put it into a report as best we could. I did that for a little while until transitioning to the position I have now, which is a health systems data analyst. What I do now is a combination, I would say, of data science and software engineering. Probably the most interesting, well, there's actually two interesting projects that I'll talk about, but the first one is actually helping with Department of Health and Human Services COVID response team. That's something that I'm working on right now that I'm sure everyone is well aware that is an ongoing issue. So what we do is we help the Department of Health Human Services, CDC, and the White House with aggregation of data from lots of different sources so that it can get into the right people's hands and be as easy for them to use as possible. So one thing that is very common and probably the hardest part of doing most data analysis in the real world is processing the data, getting it cleaned, getting it in the format that you need it to be in so that you can do the analysis. Especially things like COVID-related data where it's all coming from different states, for example. They all come to the state health department. We got to put things together in a way that when it gets to analysts at the CDC or such, that it's as easy for them to use as possible. And there's a lot of it, and it comes in very frequently. So we've been working on developing data pipelines and different products that can come out, and they can go straight into an analyst or a statistician's hands and do what they need to do with it right away. We also do some analysis ourselves. But really, the biggest thing is getting that data cleaned and ready. A lot of times, when you're starting off doing data analysis, I think a lot of tutorials and such, and I think this makes sense. The data is already cleaned for you; it's ready to go. You find something online, and it's already a clean pandas data frame or such that you can just import and be ready to go. And while that's a really good skill to learn, there's also the unfortunate truth that is almost never how things happen in the field. It's unfortunate. It'd be nice if things were clean, but it's just not the case most of the time. So really, one of the things I would say is if you are interested in pursuing a career in the data field, the best advice that I could give to anyone is not to focus on specifics of analysis or specifics of different languages or tools. The one thing that you really want to do is learn to understand how to understand data. And I know that's kind of redundant, but know how to look at a set of data and say, what does this mean? What does each row represent? Is each row a person? Is each row a state? What is it? What do the different properties of it mean? Learning how to understand the data, from there, doing the analysis will be a lot easier. Most of the things that I find hard in what I've been doing as my career is understanding the data, working with people to discuss with them, like, hey, this is your data. Like, what does it mean? What am I looking at here? This whole file as a whole, like, what is it supposed to mean? What does this table represent, and how does it relate to this other table or such? So that would be my best advice. I think I'm close to time on where I want to go. I'm trying to think of anything else that I might want to throw in, but I think that's it for now. I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Great. Thank you so much, Travis. That was a great, amazing advice and a great lead speaking of the panel. And as he said, you'll all have opportunities to ask questions of each of the speakers at the end after everybody has spoken. The next person I have the pleasure to introduce is Ursula Gorham. She's the director of the Masters of Library Information Science, Master of Library and Information Science program, and senior lecturer at the College of Information Studies. She's my colleague at the University of Maryland. Dr. Gorham, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me today. I love talking to people about these sorts of things. So like Andy said, I'm the director of one of our graduate programs. So that's the Master of Library and Information Science here at the iSchool. And I'm also a lecturer like Dr. Weaver, which means that I teach a lot. And I get to teach students in our InfoSci undergraduate program, as well as in my graduate program. And I'm really lucky because I get to teach about the things that I really care about. And so if I had to like narrow it down, I'd say the two things that really drive like my teaching, my research, my practice are information access and information literacy. Now, I just want to say a word about information literacy. Sometimes people think it's just, you know, when you go and have a library session and you're shown like how to use like a database for a class project or something, and that's part of it, but it's also so much broader than that. Like you may have heard a lot recently about fake news and misinformation and disinformation, and that's all related to information literacy too. And so one of the things I love is that, you know, the things that I care about are always changing. And so, you know, I never get the chance to get bored. So that's what I'm doing now. But actually what I want to do, because I think it's a little bit more interesting, is talk about how I got here. My career has spanned about 20 or so years. And I can see clearly how this focus on promoting access to information has always been this constant thread through like a lot of twists and turns that I've taken during my career. Seriously, a lot of them. And I don't think I always saw that, but it's been an interesting journey. So I actually began as an attorney. So when I was in law school, I realized pretty quickly that I really loved conducting research. Like that was the thing about being a lawyer that just really spoke to me. And so when I first graduated from law school, I went and worked for a judge, and it was in Baltimore, and he sat in one of the appeals courts for the state of Maryland. And so I would get the chance to do like really deep dives into research on very specific areas of law. And I loved it. Like I could spend weeks researching like one or two issues. And after I worked for the judge, I went and I worked in a law firm and I did a lot of transactional work. So that's corporate law, that is doing contracts and things like that. And I got to say, I really didn't like it as much. What I liked was when I would help out attorneys who were maybe preparing cases for trial. And, you know, they were trying to find like that one case that would really kind of help them seal the deal. And so it was kind of that hunting for a needle in a haystack that I really enjoyed. So as I began to think about it, and I really thought like, okay, what I love is the research angle, I actually went back to school and I got my master's degree in library and information science. And I thought that I would be a law librarian because then I'd be able to do the research and that could be my focus. And I wouldn't have to worry about some of the other things about practicing law that just for me weren't as interesting. So I did that for a while, and I worked for a professional association that focused on the banking industry. And so I spent a lot of time doing research on banking regulations and things like that. And because I was a lawyer, I was familiar with government documents and I enjoyed it. I mean, I can't say I loved the subject matter, but again, always that like just looking for information and just feeling incredibly satisfied when I was able to help someone who was looking for something was interesting. But, you know, sometimes life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I ended up going back into the legal field and I worked for a bankruptcy judge. And so bankruptcy courts are federal courts. They deal with a very specialized area of law. And one of the things that happened during my first year there, this was back about 10 years ago or so, and we were in the middle of a recession. And so we saw a lot of people were actually coming to court representing themselves. And that changes things, and that creates a lot of complications, both for the court system, and it's incredibly challenging often for people who find themselves having to do it. And so I found myself having to try to help people find the information they need while still being very cognizant and aware of what my limitations were, because I was an employee of the court. And so I was limited in what I could do to help them. And honestly, through like the first maybe 12, 18 months of helping people and, working with our law librarian to kind of figure out the ways that we could get information out, I guess the unfairness of it just really began to gnaw at me. And it became one of those things that just kept me up at night. And I really thought that, there's got to be ways for us to do this better, right? And this isn't on the court. This is just a matter of the fact that, things were changing and government doesn't change as quickly as, we all do. So I went back to school again. And yes, my family and friends were like, really, again, you're finding yourself in school. But I did it. And I started a doctoral program here at the University of Maryland. And so I had the chance for those 4 years to spend a lot of time conducting research on this issue of access to legal information, particularly by people who face different barriers to accessing information. And so, as is what often happens when you're getting a doctoral degree, you kind of take a few, different paths trying to figure out like what you really want to focus on. And ultimately, what my dissertation research focused on was the use of technology to get information into the hands of people who need it, who are in the court system. And so this reflected kind of an evolution of what had been going on since about 2000, where legal aid organizations, courts, libraries were all beginning to work together across different states to serve this population better. And so the research I did was one of the, at the time, most comprehensive studies of what are called statewide legal information websites. And I spent a lot of time talking to the people who developed these websites, and I talked to the librarians that work with people using these websites. And for me, it was a great experience because I was able to tell what I thought was a really important story of collaboration and of people that are making do with limited resources, but just doing amazing things. And I was happy to be able to tell their story. And to this day, I continue to work with different members of that community. And the research I did for my dissertation actually helped a couple of future studies, which is always cool to see that like what you've done has a life beyond what I gave it. So at this point, I have been teaching for about, this is my 6th year, I think I'm beginning. And like I said, I get to teach about these issues of information access and information literacy. And I get to write about them. And I get to work with my colleagues in libraries and other community organizations to address these issues in, a real and practical way. And at this point, I have been working on these issues for, like 10 years or so, and I'm still not bored by them. And I think that's pretty amazing. And I feel very fortunate that I get to bring all of it together and to work with, like I said, students and colleagues and people that I've met in person and people that I've only met via email to talk about these things and hopefully to move the needle forward a little bit. So I think that's everything I have. I'm also happy to answer any questions, but thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gorham. That was so great and so inspirational. And when you think about the first two speakers and how much we have to look forward to, one thing, if we were in person, there'd be rounds of applause after every person. So feel free to use the reactions to do the applause if you want between speakers. But I'm now going to be introducing our next speaker, who is Bryson Gulafek. He is an associate professor in the mathematics department at the United States Naval Academy. I'm honored to introduce him, Dr. Gulafek.
Hi, thank you so much, guys, for having me here today. As I say, I'm a newly promoted professor, so I'm an associate professor now at the Naval Academy. So I'm a statistician, but I see myself as a statistician and data scientist, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do and the things that I've done throughout my career till now. So maybe I'm going to start a little different here. Maybe I want to give you guys a little bit of my background first, and then tell you what I do at the Naval Academy in terms of teaching, and tell you also, guys, about some of the projects that I've been involved into and the things that I've learned through those projects, and also how I got those projects. So early on, as a student in college, I was in love with not just math, but math that are applicable, math that are meaningful. That's what I see that in computer science. So I did my bachelor degree in applied math with a minor in computer science. I was very fascinated in coding and playing with data at the same time. And then I switched, when I did my master, I decided to do my master in number theory. Number theory is just also because I was really involved into a lot of coding, and I really wanted to stay in that lane for a little bit. But after that, I decided to put the coding aspect that I had a little bit meaningful. So I decided to take a 1-year accelerated master degree in statistics and applied statistics, where I did a lot of simple projects while doing that. And then I went to Italy for a pre-PhD, where I switch again, do some algebraic geometry, come back to math again, and I decided to do my PhD in statistics. So I got my PhD in statistics from Auburn University, and my dissertation was pretty much based on developing non-parametric and parametric statistical procedure that are robust to outliers. I think for me, it's a fancy way to say that I'm a peacemaker in the world of statistics. When there is a problem, I try to find a way to fix it. And this involved a lot of data manipulation, a lot of simulation, and a lot of methodology, because everything has to come from scratch to be able to achieve that goal. And that's exactly how my love came into doing things about machine learning, trying to understand the data, because if you really want to be able to be a peacemaker in the world of statistics, you have to understand the data, as Travis mentioned earlier. It's very important till data manipulation is key. So I decided to move on into machine learning. So at the Naval Academy currently, I teach a lot of introductory courses in data science. I teach a capstone in machine learning, where students pretty much work in collaborations with a lot of company around the area. I think the last thing that student got involved with 2 summers ago was to work with New York Life Insurance on life insurance policy. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that project a little bit so that you guys know how important it is to have to understand or to know the data. So for my dissertation, my application was based on image processing. So I did a lot of image processing and texture modeling. I work with one of the local medical center at Auburn, where I helped them pretty much trying to recover some of the image that was a little blurry. It was, a project that we did for 2 or 3 months, because I had to leave to come to the Naval Academy as I was hired here when I finished my PhD. Yeah, so for the New York Life, I worked with New York Life before actually connected them with a capstone. And the reason I got connected to New York Life is because of one of the methodology I wrote. And they were so much in love with that, and they reached out and we worked on a survey data where they were trying to find a more sophisticated way to be able to detect fraud or detect whether a participant in that survey decided to mention on the survey that they don't smoke when they actually smoke, because for life insurance policy, it's very important that they have those informations. And also, they also want to be able to detect those so they don't have to spend some money to send people go do some tests or to hire people to come, take your blood and urine to be able to do all those tests to decide whether the information you gave to them is correct or not. So that's one of the project that I work with them. And then students actually, the capstone was also based on this project where students actually, after the first round we did, the student came in and helped us trying to be able to achieve this project. So student worked on it for a whole semester as a capstone course, and it was a very collaborative project, just like the setting at a company where students have a meeting with the company, the people at the company at New York Life that were in charge with the project, the talk. I was just there as a facilitator and trying to make sure that things run smoothly. So as I say, survey data, pretty messy. It's pretty, involve a lot of trying to dig deep, understand what's going on behind the scene when the survey data was collected, understand the questionnaire, understand a lot of stuff. So it's a lot of informations out there that students have to be able to process before they're actually trying to think about whether they can put together a model or they can model anything. So understanding the data is pretty key. As I tell students every day, if you think about a statistic, it's also thinking about telling a story behind whatever data or informations you have. And then sometimes the story might not be what you want, but you have to tell the story as it is. The second project that I've been involved to, I've worked with the Center of Excellence at Nha Trang University in Vietnam. So, in Vietnam, they're very big in fishery, and the production of shrimp is something that they're actually very, very, they care so much about, because shrimp is the biggest thing they have in Vietnam. And then the government was trying to understand what are the things that drive some of the farmers to not produce as much or produce too much, or what are the things the government can do to subsidize or to help those farmers to be able to have a consistent kind of production of shrimp every year. So I worked with them. So I was involved in preparing the questionnaire, data collections, and then also modeling, where we actually did an intensive work in terms of like looking at what was the things that farmers need to be able to have a good or consistent shrimp production, and also how the government can help those farmers in case of natural disaster, to help them get back to their feet and keep the production of shrimp alive through either by insurance program or just by a government kind of loan. So we work on that project, which was a very successful project. And our students also, the next capstone I'm going to be teaching next spring, hopefully students are going to be involved into this project as well, where it's going to be a lot of data cleaning, data manipulation, and also some type of modeling to be able to conclude this project about shrimp production. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have so far for you guys. I'm going to be happy to take questions at the end if you guys have questions.
Great. Thank you so much. I love it that thinking of information problem solving as being a peacemaker. I really like that. And I really, it's yet another sort of aspect or a completely different career, but as using information. So I'm next happy to introduce to you Paula Langley. She is the Alban Okun Library and Gallery Circulation Manager at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and really happy to have you, and take it away. You're on mute.
Sorry. Hello, thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. I am honored to be here with you today. Thank you for having me and for your attention as I share a bit about my formal education, my work experience, and philosophy about managing staff who serve patrons in an academic library. My name again is Paula Langley. I'm originally a native of Jamaica, the small island in the Caribbean. As a teenager, my family and I migrated to Boston, and after hearing the first two speakers, I thought there's a connection. I obtained my undergraduate degree from Rutgers University, which is in New Brunswick, New Jersey, where I majored in history and minored in psychology. I later obtained a master's degree in human resources development from Towson University. HR is not simply about hiring an employee and approving timesheets. It's selecting ideal candidates and then making sure they thrive and feel comfortable in the work that they were hired to do. Once again, I am enrolled in school. I am halfway through the master's degree in library and information science program, the program Ursula talked about, and that's how I met Dr. Weaver. I recently had to draft a personal mission statement for an assignment, which I'll share with you so that you can better understand my philosophy about the type of work I do. But before I go there, please take a moment to reflect on your expectations when using a library. The media center in your high school, for example, or your public library. Okay, my mission as a librarian is to recruit and develop a diverse staff to design spaces, offer services, and provide resources that attract and support all members of the community we serve. I hope my statement aligns with your expectations for what a library ought to be for its patrons. Personally, I love what libraries stand for. The concept of helping others find and use information for personal enrichment, professional development, academic pursuits, and even for entertainment. So let's talk a little bit about my work experience. I held a few part-time jobs, but primarily my career has been in academic libraries or even in positions that are customer service related. During the academic years while I was in college, I worked as a library student assistant on campus. In the summers, I returned to Boston and worked at a summer camp for underprivileged children. I was a counselor for 2 years, then a unit leader for the 3rd year. As the unit leader, I supervised counselors and helped them with program planning. I also worked in retail for many years at the Nordstrom department store in their customer service department. I mentioned that I worked at my college library the 4 years I was there. But by my third or fourth year, I was assigned a task that full-time staff members did and often worked without direct supervision. I remember cataloging records as they migrated from one library system to another and being assigned to train employees to perform transactions at the checkout desk. In academic libraries, we call the checkout desk the circulation desk, so you'll hear me use those two things interchangeably. When I returned to Boston, I was hired by the Mugar Memorial Library, which, Andy, where is that? Boston University. And I supervised the technicians there who worked during the evening hours. Remember, I supervised camp counselors, I trained other library employees. Plus, when I lived in the dorms, I was very involved with the Residence Life Committee. The Residence Life Council coordinated social and cultural activities for the co-eds living in the dorms. As the president for 2 years, I gained leadership experience that equipped me with transferable skills to manage employees. I spent 6 years in Boston and then decided against spending another winter in New England, you know, being Jamaican and all. So I applied for work in Maryland and was offered a circulation department supervisor's position at Towson University. Technically, it was a manager's position because in addition to recruiting, selecting, training, and coaching my staff, I had to plan and set goals for the department. Plus, supervisors don't supervise supervisors, and I had supervisors who reported to me. So a lot of supervisors there. In the end, I absolutely loved working at Towson and grew tremendously while I was there in terms of my professional development. It was during that stint that I thought perhaps I should enroll in school again. However, rather than applying to the library science program at College Park, I enrolled in the HR program at Towson, which I felt was more in line with my responsibilities of managing a large public-facing department. When there were no vacancies in my staff, I managed 8 full-time employees and up to 25 library student assistants. About 6 years ago, as a circulation department manager at UMBC, a position at UMBC became vacant, so I applied and was offered that position. The libraries within the University System of Maryland have formed a consortium. That is, we share resources and serve each other's patrons. So I was familiar with how the department at UMBC operated and knew that there were several efficiencies I had implemented at Towson that UMBC could benefit from. For those of you who are quick thinkers, being hired as a consultant was not in their budget. Plus, they still needed a manager. So Towson was doing well, and I wanted a bit more of a challenge. As I mentioned earlier, the checkout desk and the circulation department are used interchangeably. This department handles patron records and library materials once they're cataloged. So it's for us to know where in the stacks to shelve items, who was permitted to borrow them, loan periods, fines, stacks maintenance, which entails keeping the physical collection neat and orderly and accessible. In college, professors assign supplemental readings from sources separate from the textbook. The circulation department facilitates this as well. We refer to this collection as course reserves. With robust technology, most of the readings are distributed electronically, often integrating them with the course management system the campus uses. This is the fancy way of saying the portal instructors use to house course materials such as assignments, lectures, grades, etc. The library encourages professors to utilize this course page to guarantee copyright compliance. I'll wrap up by briefly discussing the competencies I look for when recruiting employees. I pulled the following excerpt from a textbook I'm reading actually this semester. It's called Information Services to Diverse Population by Nicole A. Cook. It is documented elsewhere, but this is the one. Being a librarian, you need quick reference I can provide, so I use that. Competencies of librarians involve a sense of fairness, flexibility, high tolerance, good communication skills, awareness of cultural issues, and a lack of bias towards any group, emotional maturity, and even a sense of humor. I also love Nordstrom's hiring philosophy. It says, hire the people and train for the skill. And when all else fails, I go back to the employee's manual, which was just an index card that reads, use your best judgment. Yes, it was nice in many fields to be able to start a job on day one at the mastery level. But the information field is about delivering service as well. When you have employees who can empathize with others and can anticipate their needs, that mindset makes for happy patrons because you have made their life easier for them, made their lives easier. We make resources accessible anytime and anywhere, that is, in a manner that is user-friendly and seamless. And that's kind of what the other panelists, their part of this equation, manages. When I ask my staff to report on their projects and goals for the upcoming year, I always want to know what is it that they're working on that will make the lives easier for our patrons. So I think I may be pushing it or may have spoken faster than I am, but I'm going to stop here so that you guys will have questions at the end and we'll have some answers for that. But thank you so much for your attention, and I'll answer any questions in a bit.
Thank you so much. Once again, oops. Sorry, my video is gone, but I think you can still hear me. I'm not sure. Yeah, for some reason I can't start my video, but I'll just introduce the next speaker. But thank you, Dr. Langley, and making life easier. What great advice as a career path is to work to make the life easier for people. So the final speaker, certainly not the least, but the last speaker of our panel is Matt Risco. He is the Deputy Chief of Program and Project Resource Manager of NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And so, Matt, take it away.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I kind of want to start with saying you all out there, all the students, are probably at the most interesting and fascinating points in your life on a very long journey. So congratulations to everything that got you to this point, and hopefully you can keep leveraging those good things going forward. So my name is Matt Ritzko, and I work at the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is located in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I've been with NASA for 16 years. When I started off and joined the federal government, it was a bit of a surprise to me. I knew I wanted to do a career in federal service, and I knew that I loved space. I grew up, and that was my passion. As a kid, was always looking to space flight and having an interest in it. I was always been a science fiction nerd, but what really lucked out for me was the year I graduated from Penn State. I had a degree in economics. I came out on the business and data side of things. They were hiring business majors at that particular year, and I joined our projects and programs. And within Goddard, we have a lot of different types of missions. So I used that experience over time to move to different types of projects, to see different pieces of NASA's portfolio. I touched everything from space communications missions, getting data from our satellites back to the ground, to doing missions that were looking at exploring black holes and learning more about them. That one didn't quite work out so well, so I experienced some failure at that particular point in leading a mission, trying to run a business and get types of information to make project management decisions. And it didn't go the way we expected to go. So failure taught me a lot along the way as well. I then moved into another mission called the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS. We're very good at creating acronyms and names at NASA. And TESS is currently operating around Earth, between the Earth and the Moon, and it is looking for exoplanets, or planets around other stars. And now we found over 2,000 new planets just using TESS data over the last 3 years. And that was a long journey of working with different partners, different organizations, all different types of individuals, scientists, engineers on a team, trying to make decisions and bring together a spacecraft to make it work successfully. After TESS, I moved myself into working with NOAA. So the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration is one of NASA's partners, and we work with them to do satellites. And we worked on the weather forecasts. We have satellites that are orbiting Earth, bringing down data to bring you your weather forecast every day. So that's a constant program. We need to constantly look at the Earth, and we fly around it every 45 minutes from pole to pole, doing sweeps and getting information down to the ground. So very critical to keep those assets in operation and also build new assets to replace those spacecraft. So that was a very large program of about 600 people, and is well over $18 billion of money to manage and to make decisions with. Now, my current role, I oversee all the projects and programs, and some of those variety of ones I discussed in the portfolio. I have a staff that work on each individual project or program, and every day we're making decisions trying to keep these missions on track. So talking about information is very key in that. When we have a team within NASA, when you bring people together, you have scientists that have a goal where they want to find a certain type of piece of information or have a bit of data to analyze further so that they can understand our universe better. If they're looking for planets like TESS is, or if they're trying to understand weather patterns, it all goes to answering a question and then informing themselves through data. Our engineers look at what kind of solution or question that the scientists really want to explore, and they develop a plan to get there. We have to design an instrument, design a spacecraft through answering hard engineering questions, using a lot of different types of information, systems, and tools to come up with designs, to then build prototypes, to then go and test those prototypes before we actually start building spaceflight hardware, to actually go and put it together on a satellite and then launch it. And throughout all of those pieces of information, and these projects can take years. Some of our short ones, the last is as little as about 4 years to work on one from beginning to launch. And some of our other ones, like the James Webb Space Telescope that's going to be launching later this year, or the Hubble Space Telescope, which many people are aware of, are missions that might last 10, 15, 20 years before they even launch because they are so large. So you have a lot of different team members from different backgrounds that all come together to make decisions. And in my role throughout my career, and many of the people I work with, is trying to make the best decisions that we can. So if you think about how complicated a spaceflight mission might be, There's a lot of decisions, there's a lot of pieces of information, there's different technical documents, there's different technical designs, there's risks. We have to balance looking at what might go wrong on our missions and try to forward think and project and use forecasting. And then we use financial data. We're trying to estimate how much things will cost, how long they will take. And all those different pieces of information we need to tie together to start making good decisions about, because ultimately it's taxpayer dollars. It's taxpayer money, and we're the stewards of it while we're making decisions to try to keep everything on track. And over my career, over the last 15 to 16 years, I'll say that is getting harder. It is not getting easier. Our missions are getting more complex. We're having either more new technology that's coming into our spaceflight projects that maybe before never happened or they didn't exist. And when you're talking about using data to make decisions, if we're building something that we launched before or we have some history on, it's very easy for us to go back and look at old records and say, this is how much it cost, this is how long it took, and this is the design we used, and we'll do it again. But rarely are we doing that. Oftentimes we're on a cutting edge of technology where we're thinking about a new material or a new design or trying to answer a question from a scientist that's never been answered before. That requires us to think and come up with something different. And that might mean we're working with different partners, different universities, different people from industry, different folks within NASA that are building the hardware. And we have to consolidate all of that for making smart decisions. At any given point in time, we can make a very poor one that might result in a mission not being successful, either not working when it gets to space or us failing to deliver it in time or within the budget that we have to operate within. So one thing I've been working with our team on for the last year or two is starting to use a lot of data analytical tools, leveraging more on the business intelligence end. So with where you're at as students, those would be tools I would highly encourage you to learn more about, because I think we're going to be seeing them be leveraged more and more in our industry. So I heard Kathy mentioned at the beginning Tableau when we were talking before. That's actually something NASA is highly exploring right now as a potential tool. And we're also using another one within the Microsoft suite called Power BI. And what we're finding is, because there is so much information and there's so much decisions to make, it's very hard for decision makers to know how to come to a conclusion, to make a communication and make an executive decision on what to do if they're in a tough situation. So we're finding that these tools, in terms of integrating information together so that a decision maker can see materials more clearly to make a decision, is very helpful. So I think going forward, I would highly encourage you to explore those types of tools and to give solutions. The best advice I can possibly give is learn how to communicate data effectively. As we see more information and things are getting more complicated and decisions are tough, being able to boil things down to a way that you can make a very difficult scenario a simple one, or make it a very easy for folks to digest and think about a solution and communicate clearly, that helps us be successful. And I think that's one of the possible strengths for you to leverage going forward. So thank you for having me today, and I'm happy to take questions and talk more to you about what I do. And congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Ritzko. What a tremendous, for some reason, I can't turn my video on just now, but I'm going to see if I can get it open when we start taking questions. So in this question and answer period, just if you would, raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And when I call on you, take your mute off and turn the camera on if you can, so we can see you. And then if it's for one speaker, you can say who the speaker is, who the question's for, or if it's more than one, or if it's for everyone. So just do that. And you certainly have a good selection of people to ask questions of. So let me ask, is any questions for any of the speakers? I see. Let me go to Tiffany.
Yeah, so this one's for Ms. Langley specifically. So how does like technology fit into helping your patrons, making it easier for them?
Finding information, a part of what Ursula talked about is information being accessible. So technology, we use it once it's been produced, and we're the user part of it. But in the behind the scenes is who we need to catalog information. A part of what you guys did earlier this part with any of the programming that allows to catalog, and so patrons can find information that's on the back end of it. In technology is making things seamless. We just went down with COVID right now, and if there weren't availability for you to access library resources from home, that would have been a problem to finish school, right? Or just get any form of information. So these are the technicians or the library professionals or information professionals that curate this information that allows for us to deliver. So we are I focused on the user services part of it, because we once it's curated, then we allow for people to disseminate, if that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Yang. That was a great question. Any other questions? Please raise your hand. Don't be shy. Kelly.
Hello. This question is for Dr. Gorham. I know you said that you were an attorney originally, and as we all know, being an attorney takes a lot of time, a lot of schooling. And what I'm trying to ask is, how do you venture off to different parts of being an attorney? Because I'm a little worried, since we have a lot of pressure at this age to pick something that we have to do for the rest of our lives. And it's like, how do you find the courage to choose to do something else?
So that's a great question. And I'll say that when I first kind of made the decision to change careers, it was really nerve-wracking for exactly the reasons that you just described. I had invested a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of energy into being a lawyer, and to turn around and say, I want to use my law degree, but in a way differently than I envisioned. And for me, it was a little bit of a leap of faith, I think. And, I think I said at the beginning, like, I'm able to see now how it all connected, but I didn't necessarily see that when I was going through it. But I also knew that, for example, when I was working at the bankruptcy court, and I was really, like, I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, I couldn't stop thinking about that particular problem, then it almost wasn't a choice to me at that point. It was more a matter of, I have something that I'm really interested in, and I see this avenue where I could kind of try to make a difference there. And, I was fortunate enough to be able to go back to school and pursue it. And so I think for me, what's always kind of guided me is I'm just a really curious and restless person.
That might have been the end. Felt like she got cut off there, but that was a great question and a great answer. And if she didn't finish, when she comes back, perhaps she can finish or expand upon that. I want to thank Susan and Joya for raising her hand, and actually I want to encourage all of you to raise your hands, and I'll just take them in order of as they come. So Susan, your question, and for whom?
My question is mainly for like everybody, really. So I know that a lot of you guys started in very different fields from what you're in now. And I just wanted to know, how much coding do you do? And which coding language did you start with? And that's for
Sure,
everybody.
I can take that one. the amount of coding I do depends on what project I do. I think it also a big thing is that there's different like degrees of coding. Sometimes I do some quick scripting where I just write something that'll do one specific thing I need to do. And then on other projects, I write like real production code that needs to be much more clean, usable, formatted properly, and verified and such. But I would say for the most part, like I'm writing code every day to some degree. Like I said, I was a physics math major. I think I took one computer science course in college, and to be completely honest, I hated it at the time. I changed my mind once I got into it a little bit more. I was just wrong at that point. But the first real programming language that I learned was Python. That would also be my recommendation to anyone. I think it is probably the easiest programming language to learn, and the utility that it has is very, very, very high. It's commonly used in all kinds of applications around the world. And it's very heavy in data analysis, or heavily used in data analysis as well.
Yeah, Python is actually what I'm working on right now. And like you said about when you first took your computer science class, you kind of hated it. That's kind of in the water. That's kind of the waters I'm in right now. So we're just trying to figure out how to stick to it and get better at it.
Yeah, I would say personally, like I think that's pretty common. It's very frustrating at first, and I don't think that is unique to you. I think that's just kind of how the problem is. It will get better. There's a lot of good resources online that you can use for some tutorials. In fact, the first real Python class I took online was just from EDX, and it taught me a lot. I really liked it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great question, and I know it was for everybody. Does anybody else on the panel want to answer Susan's question?
Just a quick thing. I think I second what Travis said. The first language I learned was C++, but Python is what I use now every day. It's the language that I use for everything that I do. And the good thing about programming is, as Travis said, if you start with Python, which is a very, very efficient and very, very good platform to start learning coding, once you get familiar to that, I think it's going to be a little easy for you if one day you want to navigate or go to another way or look at another programming software. It becomes a little easier once you feel very comfortable in Python.
Okay, thank you.
Matt or Paula?
In my field, I don't do coding at all. I write in Word or some other form, and then ask somebody else to do it. But for librarians who do metadata, Dublin Core is one thing that they use in their specifics or standards, RDA, that does it, but it's not on the technical side. That's just having a resource, a metadata, a book, a video, a film, being sure that that's the information you're inputting is then readable when you go into the catalog and search or do a federated search, and that transcribes into something, a readable language that other folks can do. So on the back end, I don't, but I, even with who are the patrons to borrow and stuff like that, I write it out in regular language and I hand it off to the tech guys and say, please make this available in a format that's readable and that everyone can understand.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say my experience kind of bridging both of the things that you just heard. So when I went to college at Penn State, I started in engineering before I moved into getting my degree in economics. And where I was trained at was C++. And did a lot of courses and a lot of rigorous things with C++, and eventually touched Java just a little bit. But I'll say once I joined NASA, my role there, even right in as a fresh out, I did not need to touch coding. My experiences there was more on data analytics, taking lots of different types of data and making decisions about it. So it was more about the critical thinking skills at that point that kind of kicked in, and being able to communicate the data more than coding or getting solutions there. And I think I mentioned that now we're seeing a lot of trends on tools that you don't necessarily have to do coding directly in, like Power BI or Tableau. Some, unique language there, but nothing that's too complicated for anybody to pick up. And we're starting to see that becoming a bit of a trend in some of our areas. So hopefully that helps.
All right, thank you to everybody. Thank you.
And thank you for asking all the panelists. Not everybody needs to do that, of course, but that was interesting to get an answer from every one of the panelists. And one panelist has just joined us again. Ursula, Dr. Gorham did drop off and she's back on. And the question well, Susan, do you want to re-ask the question for Dr. Gorham?
Yes, in your respective field, how much coding do you do, and do you do any at all?
So I do no coding at all whatsoever.
Okay.
So thank you again for the question. And we'll now go to Chad Bowe. Thanks for your patience and go to it.
Hi, everyone. So I have a question, and also maybe if you could talk about the tools that you also use in that process.
Yeah, so sure. So we go through within our projects and programs a project life cycle where we start from, and it's very defined. If you're ever curious or you want to read some NASA policy, if you want to take a nap or need some bedtime reading, it's called 7120, and you type in NASA and you'll find the policy document. You can view it publicly, but it talks about how we actually do our missions. But we have a project life cycle, and it follows a lot of things that you might see within the Project Management Institute or some organizations like that, where you're looking at like a project management certification, where we have discrete steps to get to the end of a project. So we go through a pre-implementation phase, then we go through an implementation phase where we're actually getting into planning, getting out like the pre-planning mode, and then we implement. We start actually taking the design, having it roughed out, go through a design review, and then actually start building, testing, and then eventually launching our missions. So throughout that entire project life cycle, we have different gate reviews. To move forward, we have an independent body and our executives, our project sponsors, that want to make sure that we're doing the right things within our project program. So when we have to make decisions, we're trying to get as much information as we can in a digestible way for those decision makers. And we want to demonstrate we've been also, as a team, making the right decisions all along the way. So how we go about doing that? Well, there's financial data where we, of course, get information about having a cost estimate and a plan, and then we see how we're executing against that. We usually have a schedule, a project schedule, using a tool like Microsoft Project, where we have all of our activities planned out to get the project completed, and we track how we're doing against that. And then we have all of our technical documents as well, all of our designs, all of our system requirements. And what we try to do is we integrate those together. Sometimes we use models. We like using, in particular, independent cost models and independent schedule models, where we will run Monte Carlo simulations, where and some of these are commercial off-the-shelf tools that could be purchased, and some of these tools are models that are homegrown within NASA, and they don't always agree, but we like that. We like having different insights from these different models to tell us, is our estimate good? Is our estimate bad? And how are we doing against the plan? And our decision makers like using that to assess performance. We also use within the team a lot of tools that also run statistical simulations. We use one in particular. It's called a joint confidence level, which is a little unique to NASA, but it was kind of based off of some information from hedge funds. We actually stole it from the stock market, if you can believe that, where we said, okay, if you think about a hedge fund, for anyone that's an economic geek out there, you like to think about how would you balance your risk. So the stock market came up with a scenario to do exactly that, to balance risk versus reward. So we kind of borrowed from that philosophy. And when we put together our plans for our missions, we'll run statistical simulation based on it, using a lot of analogous data, old NASA mission data that might be similar to what we're doing. And we also input into it risks, where we think risks might be a problem, where it might cause a schedule or cost impact. And we have those trigger within the simulation. And then that produces a confidence, saying where our estimate is, how good or bad it is. And using that, our decision makers then weigh that. They look at where our performance is as a team and compare it to where these simulations might say we are. And if we feel like we're within a certain bound, within a certain risk tolerance, they will allow us to proceed further down that life cycle. If they feel the risk is too great, you get a lot of interesting executive discussions where people question either our performance as a project team or how right or wrong one of these modeled simulations are. So we use those. Those are very heavy with our executives to make those decisions. And we have folks within the team that need to understand a little bit about how those work. So, you don't need to be a statistics expert, but I found if I remembered some of my college courses, that sometimes helps me talk to the people running the models better. But then we also have some special folks that have that as their speciality, just to run those simulations. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
A nice deep dive on a topic. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. Rehan Chuduri, thanks for your patience, and turn your camera on and take your mute off, and let's hear it.
All right. So I want to ask sort of a follow-up question to the last part of Mr. Ritzko's response to Chad. So basically, you mentioned the fact that you incorporate a lot of economics principles, looking at the stock market data, looking at other things as you do risk analysis for your NASA's business plan. So my question is, would you want to, I guess, could you expand on that a little bit, since I'm a person interested in economics and policy making? I wonder how, what specifics, does it go when it comes to making those sort of business plans?
Sure. So yeah, I'll be happy to take that. So I would say my background in economics is helpful. So about 10 to 15 years, 15 years ago, I joined the agency as one of the few economics folks on staff. A lot of our financial folks came from a traditional financial management or accounting background. So the economics piece of it, I mean, speaking personally, I felt helped me out in terms of looking at the data a little differently. We had a lot of folks that would be in a little more of a traditional, here's a plan, here's an actual, here's a delta. You could kind of, anybody kind of do that. I mean, that's adding and subtracting, right? So where we're kind of going, and I think we're seeing more of it, is we're valuing people actually being able to analyze the data and draw conclusions from it. So that's kind of where the econ background has been a little advantageous, and we're seeing now a little more of some of our folks that come into our specifically our business community that have an econ background kind of bring a little more of that analytical perspective in. And I think that to me is the real key. It's and I think I mentioned in my big broad talk, the thing that I think is most useful for folks when we talk about data, and it's any kind of data, isn't just doing here's a number. And we saw a lot of folks get into that mode again 10 to 15 years ago with our projects, and that resulted in them not being successful. We had a lot of problems. We had a lot of cost overruns. We had a lot of schedule delays. We weren't meeting commitments. What we found is making sure we provide the meaning behind the data. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's what helps people make better decisions about data. So I think that's where we're valuing either capturing lessons learned from industry and trying to roll them in, or again, trying to develop these models where we can be predictive and forecast better based off of information we have today, try to get more predictive about our performance. And we're using all kinds of different tools to get there. So hopefully that gives you a little insight.
Thank you so much for your response.
Great follow-up question. And again, thanks for your patience. Sarika T, you're up.
My question is for Dr. Qualifac. So you mentioned that you worked with surveys and it can be a difficult task to analyze them and create stories for them. So I wanted to know what's the longest you've ever taken to analyze and create a story for a survey, and what was it about?
Good question. I think especially the New York Life survey was the biggest survey that we had to deal with. So they had a survey that they conducted for about 6-7 years. It was about, I think, more than 50,000 participants. And those informations are mostly about the socioeconomic informations, the medical health informations, the educations, and all those information. And in terms of surveys, sometimes people don't answer every single questions. So you have to be able to find a way to process those information on that data. So when I say processing, I mean, I don't want to use the word clean. You have to make sure you take into account that, hey, what % of participants did not answer a specific question? Do we actually need to incorporate that question into our process in building the model or into our process of understanding data? So I think just the data processing and preparing the data to be able to use to answer the question we wanted to answer on that project took us about 2 to 3 months. It's intensive coding because you have to be able to make sure you get a look of every single questions and what % is missing, what % is there. Do we have to incorporate that? Do we have to keep it away? There's so many questions. And the more you understand the data, the more questions you have to go back to the people who actually conducted the survey, or the more question you have to go back to the project that we're trying to solve. Do we actually think we can solve this question? So it's a long process. That's the biggest data processing that I've been involved into.
Okay, thank you.
So with that,
I have one more very quick question. So, sorry for interrupting.
Sure.
So this may seem unconventional, but I actually have a question for the moderator. So for Mr. Fellow, so you mentioned the fact that as a former mayor, when you're making decisions for the city of College Park and whatnot, how did you integrate data analysis at when you're coming up with understanding plans and proposals for the city in development?
So that's a great question, and thank you for it. And I apologize for not being the prompt says to pick another video setting from video settings, and there is no other video setting that I could find. So, you don't need to see me. I'm happy to answer that question in a broad way. That for local elected officials, like a mayor, College Park, or anybody in the city council, in most local offices, it's a part-time job and your full-time job is something else. And so you don't really have much time to do much analysis of anything other than what staff gives you. And you always hope for the best information from staff and from the surrounding jurisdictions and from reports that are coming in that are presented to the mayor and council. As you go up in levels of government, county council, state legislature, governor's office, Congress, the Senate, you get more and more information sources and more staff capacity to develop analysis. And also all of the nonprofit organizations and all the for-profit businesses that are lobbying to get decisions made in their behalf, develop information-based statistics to give to decision makers for them to make a decision. And you've probably heard the, statistics lie, or that you can make lots of different spins and use numbers to present lots of different arguments. And that is why trusted information, making things easier, being a peacemaker, as you heard, developing your skills to make it easier to make good decisions for government at whatever level is really why I get so excited about information technology, and also people like you, people who are coming up out of high school and into college and beyond to use information for good. And so I think that the broad answer to the question is almost everyone, and maybe everyone, uses all the information they can to make good decisions that are best for them, whether it's investments, And this includes personal decisions. And it's including for communities or a block, or like how to do something right about a community project. So you can really use the information that you're learning in both the courses at your level in this camp that you've just been in, the Information Challenge, but also as you go through your career, just think about like how you can use information and new technologies and develop new technologies to make the world a better place. And I can definitely tell you, elected officials are hungering for the kind of information. They would be happy to hire people who provide them good information. So it's very nice to hear your interest in economics and policy, and I hope to hear more from you, and actually from all of you, so it's not just you. Are there any other questions? I think we have time for one more question, and maybe someone who has not asked a question yet. All right, well, so hearing none, now I'll ask anyone who has asked a question who would like to ask one more question. You've got the opportunity. Rehan, thanks for your initiative in asking a follow-up.
No problem. Appreciate it. It was very exciting to ask that question.
Well, it's exciting to answer. Any other questions? Yeah, hearing none, I'm going to turn it back to Donal.
Excellent. Well, I almost feel after those really amazing questions, I almost feel like we didn't prepare the panelists enough by warning them how amazing these students are and how hard the questions would be that were coming at them. Because, I mean, that was incredible. So thank you for your amazing questions. And also, I want to thank Andy for coordinating this panel and moderating. And I want to thank all the panelists for coming and being asked these tough questions and giving such great answers and insight into such a wide variety of information professions, right? This was, we had everything from coding to law to libraries to space and project management. So that's really incredible. And I mean, it really showed how they all tie together. And I just want to call back to one thing that Matt Risco said about making sense of data and how important a skill that is. I think what we saw over this week with these incredible students is how they came in and were given these overwhelming data sets and these new technologies, and we asked them to make sense of it. And then at the end, they came up with amazing presentations that really told a story about the data that they selected. And that's a tough skill. And I think the students really started to understand how tough that skill is, but also that that they're able to do it, and that hopefully they're excited to go on and do more of it, particularly when they go to university. So thank you again to Andy and the panelists and our incredible students for asking these questions. I just wanted to invite the panelists and Andy to, if you have time this afternoon, the judging, the award ceremony will be happening. Let me double check the time so that I don't make things wrong, but at 3 on the UMD or the iSchool UMD YouTube channel, that's where that will be streaming. And so that will be very exciting. We have the dean and the provost introducing that, and then the award ceremony. But yeah, thank you, everyone. This has been incredible. And Kathy, do you have anything to add before we close out?
You'd think after a year and a half, I'd be able to find the mute button easy. No, I think that's fantastic. I really appreciate everyone's input and everyone's time. This has been an incredible week for us. So we do hope that you all can watch the live version of the award ceremony at 3. If not, it will stay on the YouTube channel. Each of the teams, as they're presented with their awards, will be giving a summary of their projects, and you'll get to see what amazing work they did. So thanks again to everyone.